Have you ever felt you weren't good enough? Like everything you do is subpar or below average? I know I have. It's a feeling many writers struggle with, but it doesn't have to bring you down. Because unbeknownst to most, imposter syndrome is a powerful tool when used properly. Imposter syndrome has been around since the dawn of time, but it didn't have a name until 1978, where it was actually labeled a phenomenon. In a way, this is a more proper way of looking at imposter syndrome, because it isn't something that can be diagnosed by a doctor. It's a natural human condition. The phenomenon can be classified by a series of symptoms, including, but not limited to, persistent self-doubt, attributing success to outside factors, fear of being found as a fraud, a drive for perfection, and difficulty accepting praise. You probably know if you already have imposter syndrome, but if you aren't sure, this is the one case where self-diagnosis might help. Although these symptoms might sound like they'll only bring down your writing, there are some surprising upsides. If you stick around to the end of this video, you'll learn how to use these writing strategies for your own good. My first use of imposter syndrome is that it pushes you to improve your writing. You see, imposter syndrome and being a perfectionist go hand in hand, and although being a perfectionist isn't always the greatest thing, it allows you to put a lot of effort into your writing. The idea is that imposter syndrome makes you think you aren't good enough. So instead of writing a lackluster rough draft and moving on, you appreciate the fine details and put far more work in. I'm going to take some of you back to your high school days with this example, but The Great Gatsby by F. Scott Fitzgerald features some pretty evident hyper-fixated writing. The first chapter of this book opens up with a very disorienting introduction to the main character, but it's also full of really unique prose that isn't seen anywhere throughout the rest of the book. Fitzgerald was likely some kind of perfectionist, and that's why his writing was so honed. And you know what? In the end, he ended up alright. Pardon the massive heart attack. This brings me to my second surprising way you can utilize imposter syndrome, and that's using it to dive deeper into the research part of your writing. Writers with imposter syndrome tend to put a lot more value into certain aspects of their book, and that includes the research that goes into a story. If you're writing a book that frequently features planes, you might put a lot of time into learning about aircraft types. I'm not saying you should become a pilot. I'm just saying there are a lot of small details and interesting pieces of information most writers never pick up on. My example for this strategy is one that's pretty close to home, because I'm actually going to make mention of my own writing. I'm currently working on a book based heavily on the concept of the Chernobyl liquidators, who were the soldiers that helped clean up after the nuclear meltdown. Before getting into writing my story, the information I had on the liquidators was relatively small. Most of what I knew was from the HBO show and a single book, so it was really helpful to dive into the lives of these men from the past and learn about the things they had to do. And maybe you're starting to see a pattern now. But my third use of imposter syndrome is that it makes you value your choices more. This can be in either plotting or the actual writing of your story. It doesn't matter. But you will put a lot more thought into the decisions that impact your work. Does a character do this? Or do they do that? Imposter syndrome can actually scare you into making very original story beats, like a very unique twist on a common trope, or creating an interesting character. It makes you put a lot of thought to dialogue, which for some writers is a good half of their story. It makes you question if a character would really say that, or if it's best for your story if a character says that. It makes you wonder about where things are heading, and if you actually want them to head that way. It gives you a vast advantage over people who are far more accepting of their work. And last, but not least, my fourth and final use of imposter syndrome is that it makes you humble. Being humble is an incredibly useful skill in the writing field, because you aren't a perfect writer. People who aren't humble would like to think otherwise, or they think highly of their skills in general. This means when they receive feedback, they don't take it to heart, which is something I've preached heavily about in my last two videos. For you, my fellow writer with imposter syndrome, you should take that feedback and write it down somewhere so you don't forget it. Because unlike the bombastic writers of the world, you care about what people think and value criticism. Using the input of others is like turning your shoulder when you shift lanes on the highway. It's the only other way you can see your blind spots. Before I get to my actual conclusion, I'd like to say I see a lot of writers give advice about avoiding perfectionism. Sometimes these tips they give about just getting words out and forgetting about quality make me question their authority on the matter. Perfectionism isn't the solution to all your problems, and neither is imposter syndrome, which usually coincides with perfectionism. However, you don't improve by putting together meaningless sentences that have no flow, no unique structure, or meaningful message. You improve by looking back and seeing what doesn't work. As a writer, I've struggled with one form or another of imposter syndrome, or perfectionism, and it's definitely done some bad, but it's also helped me create a drive to never stop improving. I came up with the idea for this video after I published my last video on writing more every day. That video got 5 views compared to the 200 views of my last one. If that doesn't give someone imposter syndrome, I don't know what does. And you know what? That only pushed me to make a better video this time around. So lucky me, right? Anyways, hopefully you understand how imposter syndrome is a natural part of the writing process. The drive to improve our writing is a result of thinking, that wasn't good enough. The very basis of imposter syndrome is rooted in these ideas that we have to keep improving. So I ask, what would happen if that drive disappeared? What if every writer just thought, yeah, that's good enough? I think Bob Ross has a pretty good outlook on this, which is that there are no mistakes, just happy accidents. Have fun during the writing process, and learn from it foremost. That's the most important part. I'd like to thank you for watching. If you enjoyed this video or learned something, leave a like so you can support whatever I do in the future. If you want to watch more videos when they come out, subscribe and turn on notifications. Alright, that's it. Bye.